or an obscene amount of energy and encryption power in order to solve a problem, which then it's a billion times quicker for every other node to validate that you solved the problem, that you did the work. So the asymmetry is the secret to how the network works. And so how do things spread in time? Like, for example, I'm an engineer. I'm not a Newton, you want geniuses. Newton, Einstein, Mozart, Beethoven. They extracted stuff from the ether that you couldn't do in a million years, that I couldn't do in a million years. If I tried a billion years, I couldn't do it. I mean, for thousands of years, humanity worked without the calculus and variations in calculus. And Newton, that one guy, probably contributed 90% of everything around us. That one person looked up and extracted so much. Physics, astrophysics. Now, took him a lot of work or a lot of something. How about every single math student that came along after him? How long did it take them to figure out that calculus was useful? Like, you think it's hard for me to figure out that calculus is useful? No, an engineer figures it out. I'm an engineer. I'm a very I'm not, an engineer is not dogmatic or what would be religiously against things that work. I give you a chip, I give you a math, I give you a component, I give you steel. Could you invent steel? Could you create the first steel factory, steel refinery? That's hard, right? Steel refineries blow up, they kill everybody, right? We could spend 10,000 years trying to work that out. That's, if you ever studied, metallurgy, right? Materials. When you get to the part where you're studying steel, it's pretty intense, and they give you all these thick books, 1,000 pages, steam tables, what's the right amount of carbon to mix into, into iron to get steel? Very complicated. I look at it and I think I would never in a million years want to have to have figured that out, but I'm happy to accept the gift.
Yeah.
I'm happy to accept it, and so proof of work is like someone did a lot of work, but you don't have to have as much horsepower to figure out that the hash function is right as you did to actually do it in the first place. And that's why this stuff spreads fast, because you did your work, Dan did his work, VJ did his work, right? All the maximalists did their work. They had less information and they had more uncertainty. And so it took a lot more effort. You had to think more deeply. I did my work, but I had a lot more information. It only took me a few months a month to come to the conclusion because I had a lot more information. Then I invested 20 years worth of earnings in a few weeks, okay? I took 20, you talk about work, right? I took 20 years of energy and I put it on the blockchain in 4 weeks. And then I made it public. I published the hash function, right? And I said, I did all my work. I looked at everybody else's work. And then I printed a block, and my block is $500 million, or actually $600 million worth of energy. That was the total nominal amount of cash I put into the blockchain. And I put it out there. And now I leave it as an issue. You can spend the 1 month and you can go to hope.com and read everything Michael Saylor read. Or you can skip that and you can just say, hey, here's a dude that put 600 million into the blockchain because he thinks it's the first true digital monetary network in the history of the world, and it's the Facebook of money. And I think what people don't get, not everybody gets, I think they don't realize there's investors out there. They're just looking for an idea this month. I have $10 billion. I have to put 500 million in something. Okay, what's this idea? Okay, guy puts 500 million into Bitcoin. Why? Well, because he thinks it's the ultimate safe haven asset and it's better than gold and it's going to be like Facebook. Yeah, and he put the 500 million in? Yeah, let me read that again. Okay, give me some of that. They don't have to go down the rabbit hole, right? They don't have to do the work that you did any more than a node has to do the work to validate that the block is good. They just have to read the hash, right? It's a question of, do they trust me, right? And by the way, not everybody does, but you don't got to convince everybody, Dan. You just got to convince anybody, right? There's 10,000 billion-dollar entities. All you got to do is convince a handful of them. And by the way, you don't have to convince them as much as me. I said, well, I've looked at it. It makes sense that I'm going to put substantially all of my free cash into this. At the company level, if I had 500 million in cash, I'm going to either buy my stock back or buy Bitcoin with it as fast as I can. But you wouldn't have, that's a treasury reserve asset commitment. You could copy that, but you could also say, well, I'm Paul Tudor Jones. I have 10 billion. I'll just put 500 million into this. That's a much lesser commitment. You've got 100 billion in your portfolio. You might bet 500 million expecting you'll get 100 to 1 return 1% of the time or 5% of the time. I think that's a good idea. So I think that's why, everything's accelerating, right? And it's a fire, right? As I said, it's a campfire, then it's a bonfire, then it's a forest fire. And you're like, well, I don't get it. Why is the fire spreading twice as fast? Well, because it's an exponential process. Because it's spreading twice as fast, because twice as many. At the end of the day, by the way, it's important that 100 million people embrace Bitcoin, but there's 10 people that can triple the price of Bitcoin. 10, right? This is not like Facebook. I make this point, nobody ever brought 1 billion friends to Facebook. This is not like Facebook. This is like when a person with $10 billion decides that they want to adopt this network and they put $2 or $3 billion on the network. That's going to be more monetary energy that flowed in the network than the first 10 million people put in the network. It's a 10 million to 1 game.
Yep.
But here's the other thing. When a person with $10 billion puts $10 billion on the network, they've got a friend with $10 billion, right? Warren Buffett plays bridge with Bill Gates.
Right.
And then they talk with Mark Zuckerberg. So when this hits that social network, It's like, okay, well, 1 billion to 2 billion to 4 billion to 8 billion. And those 4 decisions, those 4 blocks have more impact on the network than the first 10 million blocks. And so that's what's driving Bitcoin. And what I expect is going to drive it